Ayin Beis, Volume 1, at the bottom of page 280, the beginning of Discourse 37, Chapter 145. Zois Chukas. And here the Rabbi says, the summary of the beginning of the discourse is Tatzcham Tem Tzemei Chaim Medaber Shebeseichel. The running theme here, where we are now, is after establishing in the first section of the whole Hemshech Ayin Beis, we call the first shlav, the first phase, the dynamic and the difference between the energy, the structural energy, and the energy outside of the structure, beyond the structure. We call it immanent energy, Eir Mamala, Eir Pnimi, that's integrated, internalized, that sustains existence. Then there's a transcendent energy, it's called Eir Sevav, Eir Makif, Keser, as opposed to the 10 spheres that are Eiris Pnimim, Eiris Bekelim. Keser is not Eiris Bekelim, Keser is Rotzen, beyond the structure. So in this second section, we've been learning since Shavuos Ayin Gimel, we've been learning that that this is the difference between the Ovis and Matan Torah. And the Vedas Ovis, all the work of the Ovis, basically in Sefer Bereshis and Chumash, the first Sefer, is all about realigning the universe to be aligned with its source, with its purpose, which is primarily the infusing the universe with the divine immanent energy. But he explained it that it's all the way, not just the minimal, but to the maximum, even ad bli dai, even to the point where it's meshaded, even that it shatters the laws of nature, but all within the structure of nature. That's what we just learned in the last chapter. So Kel Shaddai, when it says Ve'era, El Avram Yitzchak Yankov Kel Shaddai, Kel Shaddai captures the word Shaddai, has all the meanings that he explained. Shaddai from the word She'emer La'ilomei Dai, which really means, is referring to the Eir HaGvul. He's telling the Eir Dai, not to flow further, regulating the flow in the structure. We had the interpretation that it's V'kesi Lachem Bracha Ad Bli Dai, which is still in the world of structure. Ad Bli Dai means Ad Sheyivla Sifsesechem Lemer Dai, which is also still not completely Bli Gvul. It's in the world of Gvul that Yosef Sesechem, the lips where are worn out, or are what do we say, are withered due to by saying enough. And then finally, there's a few other interpretations, Shadayim, from the word Shadayim, which is also the flow of energy, and also the final interpretation we learned last chapter, which was from the Pasuk, Shade Shadai Yove, the word shade, which means l'shadid, to shatter. And he talked about the miracles that are within nature. They're meshadid hamarachis. The words of this is like the Ramban explains that this goes to the concealed miracles within nature. So it's not nature itself, which is also a divine flow. Then there's miracles that are open miracles, Havaya. But then there's how it manifests in nature, like Purim, like the story of Esther, that in nature there's a change, the code is changed, so to speak, the source code.
So what is shade?
Shade means meshaded, from shattering, right. Like shidud hamarachos. Suspending, different words, however you tell. Meshaded is shidud, is usually breaking. Okay. And this is all what the Ovis achieve. And this is also what it means. We say de machsede, that it fulfills the chesodin. What's the chesodin? That when the world was created, it had to be created through a certain diminishing, through a chesodin eir, as reflected in the moon, as reflected in existence, as reflected in the tzimtzum, and all the different ways he explained. And de machsede is what the Ovis is. De machsede to give, to fill back, to compensate, and fill up the gap, the void. So it's also from the word day, from the same word day, machsede. It's not la'ashrei, mechayev la'ashrei. It's not ashirus. It's whatever was missing, you give to, but you give to the maximum. That's the key here, and that's also what he said. Ki ein machzer lireov. He spoke the word machzer. Ein machzer. There's nothing missing. And this all comes, as he explains, in order to achieve this. This is the yichud in Kabbalistic words. This is the yichud of Abba v'Ima Tatoyin, which is moichin, not midas. Not meichin as it applies to the application. I'm sorry, not the application as it's informed by the intelligence, but it's actually the intelligence that informs the application. Midas shebe meichin. The lashon of Kabbalah, this is Yichud Yisrael Saba Tfuna. Yisrael Saba is the midas shebe chochma, or nihi shebe Abba shebe chochma, and Tfuna is the midas or nihi of bina. He explained the yichud of these two also requires a higher force called keser, but it's coming from chitzenius keser. He put it from the level where, let's say, the 10 hidden spheres, where the infinite energy allocates shiras mebikeach and estimates what kind of world is going to be. So that's the root of where the others reach. And of course, there's the pnimis keser, which is connected to the yichud pnimi of avo, which we haven't gotten to yet. That's really Matan Torah. That's a whole new, that's a Er Chodosh. That's not Daimach Sede, where you're filling and aligning the world to the best it can be. You're going beyond that, beyond even what the world had initially when Ikar Shchina B'Tachtenim Haisa. That's a summary. Yeah, the others, right, they do that. It says, Bo Avram Hischil Lahayir. Avram came and he began to bring this, to fill this emptiness, this void. Then he explained how all this fits in with Kerach, because Kerach was the antithesis to this. That's why Yaakov didn't want to be Misachas to Kerach, because Yaakov is the obvious. His union is filling the void. And Kerach wanted to, when Medrash says Karoch, he wanted to create a vacuum, a boldness, as he said. The siders should be disconnected from their source. And the others bring the divine back into the source.
Why did Terach want it?
Doesn't discuss why. He just says he wanted. Why? Because he was. There's the Kavanas L'Shma that says in Chassidus. He wanted to be like L'Asad Love, and then there's his own. That depends how there's different interpretations. It's definitely for a deeper reason. It wasn't just for glory. But in Kabbalah, for sure, Chassidus talks about a whole Kerech as a ganze that. There's like kinds of opinions. He wanted the Gvuras to be Iker, so many other different approaches. But bottom line is, he was Menaged to the Isha Chesed, which is the Kohen, which is Gilui, and he was Gvura Levi. But he took, like he said, the language, the key word is, the operative word is, Kerech Rotze Ba'avdola Atzma. He wanted the Havdolah itself, not what it's supposed to bring. The Havdalah, the separation, let's say, between the Sira, between Adam and Chava, first they were back to back, one entity, then they were separated in order for them to come face to face. And Aliyah, you read it, Serech Aliyah, Havdalah. The Yom Sheni, on its own, is, you don't say Kitev, because it could be possible Machlekas. Diversity is a blessing, divisiveness is not. Yom Shlishi creates Shalom, Keteres. So the same thing here, Kerech was focused on day 2, basically, on the division, separation. Good. And that's the antithesis of Yaakov. On the other hand, it came to Duchen, Yaakov was Misachas to them, because Duchen is the union of Nigan. He said that's Yaim Samech Elikim, that's Gili. That you bring the Gili of Shem of Avaya in Shem Elikim. Samech Elikim. So like revealing in Elikim, which is Helam, you're revealing a joy, which is through Yayin. Okay. Good. So now we continue next Maimer. Obviously, the big picture here is all about the interface. We're connecting the highest levels of Elokus to the lowest levels of existence. And to do so, we need to go step by step and building all these connections and all these switches, as we've said, that every one piece has to be in place, or else if there's a gap, there's ultimately not going to be able to be a perfect interface. So for a seamless interface to work, everything has to be perfectly in place. I gave the example, like in the human body, there are millions and millions of things that have to work, and whether it's nerves and muscles and blood vessels and so on. And if there's one little switch missing, it can cause major havoc. So you need to have it all in aligned in the proper way. That's even just in the body, let alone here in the big whole cosmic order, Seder Shtalshalos. But in general terms, we're talking now Atzilus and Biyah, Klolus and Protis, basically the bridge between the two worlds, and it's the others that are essentially filling in the fullest Mamalakal Amen, basically bringing as much Elokus possible that's possible within the parameters of existence, to the point that it almost right before bursting. So you have to know how to do that perfectly. And I said the other day, I think, and I actually wrote it here, the more I read it, the more it seems very, very fitting that the three meanings in Shaddai are very aligned with the three meanings in Sefirah. Actually, four meanings in Shaddai are aligned with the four meanings in Sefirah: Sipur, Mispur, Sipur, Sapir, and Sefer. And from the bottom up, because it's all about aligning things, so Sefirah begins with a Mispur, a number, Dai. Shamal Elame Dai, that's clearly number. It means it's a parameter. Then it moves to Sipur, which is already more Gilui, starting to reveal the inner story. So he said Shaddai is also from the word V'kesilach and Bracha Bilai, because Sipur also tells the story of Machshavas and Alamas, also of the Bligvul. Then comes Sapir, which is total seamlessness, where you're already moving from the Keli to the Eir, and there you're talking. We have a certain later Beis going on here almost every day. Everybody's got their minhagim. And at the third level is Evan Sapir, is the Sapir, the brightness, and that I believe corresponds with what he said was Shidud Hamaroches, because that's already getting out of the structure into the Agilui Eir. And finally, Sefer, if we recall, Sefer was that the field of energy, the white space upon which you put the letters and everything, and that seems to be very consistent with Ayin Ha'elam Umleye Kedai Lelokuse. That means that as much as you bring into the world, Eir HaGvil is still not Kedai to Eir HaSever, which is beyond the structure.
So the second one higher than
Sipur.
Sipur. Yeah, how does that correspond?
Because he said Sipur was the story. Remember, so he said the main story is that the Maven Dover Meter Dover, that the Eir HaGvul shows that there's Eir HaBligvul.
So how's that in Shaddai?
So that's Abli That's not just number Dai. Sha'amar Le'lami Dai, but that brings all the way to the level of Abli Dai and Dai, like Li Mispir and Mispir, basically. Right? I mean, it resonates. It's very consistent. And that's exactly. It doesn't say it. Maybe they'll say it later. It just makes it very gishmak, because then what you have really is that the Ovis are leading us through those stages, and Shaddai captures all these meanings. Yeah. So now we start by Idabar Hashem. This is Shabbos Parasha Chukas Tov Terag. It doesn't say Tirag, but Terag, like Aryeh Mila Yira, Aryeh Shag Mila Yira, Terag from the word.
Terag is ergo.
Ka'ayel Tarek.
Ka'ayel Tarek, like a cry, a pierce, a yearning. You also say it in Tarek in the Nigan with Nanim Zmiris, Nafshi Sarek. Yeah. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, Zeischuk Satera Shutziva Hashem. Not far, also fitting where we are now. We have the Parsha Parah already, Parsha Parah coming. So Hashem spoke to Moshe.
This week there's a Parsha.
This week is a Hefsek, I think. Zocher is this week is Zocher. What are you talking about? This week is Shabbos Zocher.
Next week.
When is Purim? Purim. Oh no, right. I'm sorry. We're ready. Today's Friday. Unbelievable. Wow. Next week is Zocher. This is a Hefsek, Shabbos Hafsaka. 1 year I remember Tov Mem. The first year I read Hanukkah, the Rebbe spoke on Shabbos Hafsaka, a whole thing about the fifth Shabbos. Hafsaka is also Ayin. Hashem spoke to Moshe. You know these two characters, Hashem and Moshe. This is the law of the Torah. Asher tziva Hashem, that God commanded. Vayikra lecha para aduma. Shall take to yourself a red heifer, tmima, pure, perfect, innocent, complete, all the correct. Yeah, wholesome. We have to understand, what's this whole arichas, this whole elaboration? Should have said, speak to the children of Israel, they should take up part here. It says that Hashem spoke to Moshe. This is the law of the Torah. What would have been missing if he just said, It's kinds of extra words seemingly. What's the richas, the elaboration in the preface, that this is the law that God commanded. It says, Rabbi Yitzchak, Posach, Rabbi Yitzchak opened up and said, Kol ze nosisi b'chachma, amarte, hachakma v'hi d'cheikem mimene. I tried to understand all this with my wisdom, but amarti, I said, this is like from the book of Kehelas, hachakma v'hi d'cheikem mimene. Yeah, Shleima Melech. That I tried to understanding it, but it's too distant from me. It eludes me. Ksiva yitna lekim chachma l'shleima. The Medrash continues. What Moshe said, Shleima said, it eludes me. So then Hashem responded. He gave Shleima chachma, wisdom, the tfuna, how to be made. He gave him chachma and tfuna, a lot, in abundance.
That was not them. That was before. Even though
the Medrash is associating Shleima saying achakma v'hi d'cheikem.
Yeah.
It looks like it. Yeah, look the Pesach. This is a Medrash. The Medrash is saying on this whole stage chukas that this is a chachma v'hi d'cheikem and ksivayit. Yeah, and the response, the Medrash is bringing the response that Hashem said to Shleima. Kechel asher asvas hayam. It was so abundant. The chachma and tfuna that he gave him, actually chachma and tfuna clearly is going to be Sol Sabbath tfuna. Right, there you go. Like the grains of sand, kechel, like the sand, edge of the water, which we also brought, if you remember. The sand, edge of the water was you cover hamayim. Huh? Yeah. Mahu kechel. This is all the medrash. Mahu kechel. What kind of example is that? We're talking here wisdom. It's only comparing wisdom to sand. So keshem shachel. Geder liyam, just like the sand is the boundary that's around the ocean, around the sea. So too was the wisdom like a geder, a boundary for shleima. What does mean? But okay. Matla amrin das de chasarto makanisa. Like they say, like an example that's given, like a mashal, yeah. Matla amrin, it's like imrin, like so to speak. Yeah, it's matla amrin, as they say the mashal, that when you're lacking deya makanisa, what are you acquiring?
What did you acquire?
What do you acquire? Deya kanisa machasarta. Then of the opposite. And when you do acquire deya, what are you missing? You're not missing anything. What's the shaykhs mit khayl? What's second gegeder l'shleima? What's the shaykhs gegeder l'shleima? Weiß ich nicht. Okay, let's see. Omeidig beingen.
I
think it means they used to ask whatever you want, right?
Right.
So you said you could have some richness.
Yes, he took the thing, because when you have that, you have everything. That's. We need to look in the Medrash, to be honest. But let me see what he says with that. No, but this is clearly explaining the geder l'shleima, why it's a geder.
Everything is within.
Yeah, but why is it like sand? Okay, let's see. The Medrash is Meirich, elaborates on the union of the wisdom of Shleima. U'Mesayim Omer Shleima al Kol Eila Madati, And the Medrash concludes, Shlomo said, on everything I understood, everything I was able to grasp, what's the word for it? Yeah. And Amadati means, literally means to stand, but he means everything I was able to contain or to absorb. Yeah, right, exactly. I was able to appreciate or understand it all. Upashas Pora, Aduma, Chakati v'shalti upashvashti v'yirechekim mimena. This is all an explanation of that pasuk. Chakma v'yirechekim mimena. But Pashas Pora Aduma, Chakati, I researched, I investigated. Shalti, I questioned, I probed, or no, questioned really. I challenged. Or Pashvashti is like my probed. Pishpush meaning like I went in, I interest deeper. Right. I probed. And remained, and it's distant from me. And that's the meaning, back to the pasuk, Rabbi Yitzchak pasuk, calls in the sisi b'chokhma, that all this I tried with chokhma, marti chakma, b'pasha aduma hidecheka. That's referring to the pasha para aduma. No, it's not just referring to wisdom in general. So clearly, 1 second. So in other words, it wasn't Hashem's response. Even after Hashem gave him all the wisdom, Paraduma eluded him. Is that correct? That's what appears here, right? Because it seems like okay, yeah. No, because huh?
What's the gather?
I don't know. If you look in the Medrash, I'm sure the Medrash talks about it. I have a Medrash here if you want me to look. We could look.
The Shlomo was going with Chokhmah, and this is something about Chokhmah Islam.
Maybe that's the gather, that he was not able to go beyond. In other words, the question is, what's the matla amrin tas chasarta makanadak kanisa machasarta?
I'm sure he's going to explain it.
Okay. He's bringing what he needs to bring here, but we have to, in the Medrash itself, we have to look inside to really fully. I mean, I'm not going to guess. I don't remember the details there. I remember, you don't bring these messages abroad often. The tzarech lahav, we have to understand. Mawi inyan paraduma shagam shleima b'chachmosei le'amid aleh. What's this mystery? What's this thing with paraduma? Of all things, even Shlomo, with his wisdom, was unable to get it. The chol inyanim amid aleim. Everything he was able to grasp and understand. Or paraduma mateh chakma v'hidecheka. Paraduma, suddenly I say, it was chakma v'hidecheka. I tried to understand it, and it's distant from me. I mean, based on what we learned, it's very clear. Chokhmah is a cheka, a sense of awe. But I just did the opposite of what Kuflam Test says. It's supposed to be kavitz meche now, not. Okay. I'm just trying to learn the pshat. I'm just saying. I'm jumping already. It's all right. V'gam, also we have to understand ma'u amarti ha'chakma d'machas shirecheka shelamayla ma'asog eich rotze des chakam ba. So what's also this effort? The emphasis here, not just that it's beyond. It could have just said paradum is beyond wisdom. He said no. He's making an effort also. What's this thing? Achakma, I tried. Since it's distant, l'mayla ma'asog. So what does the hava mean? What was the consideration that he wanted to desire to understand it? It's an interesting good diuk. Like again, after the fact, the Medrash have to say, Paradum is one of the things that's a mystery. It's a chukah. Again, no, told no, that he tried to understand it, and so all things that eludes him. So clearly, something going on here that's in between wisdom and beyond wisdom.
How would he know that it eludes him if he wouldn't have made an effort?
But after the fact, why are we told? It's also why are we told? Why do we have to know all this detail? First of all, with these Havamim, there's also something in Torah, here we go. What's the scene in Das Kanisa Machasat? The Koi al Shlema. Oh, right. We just said Das Kanisa Machasat. Once you have Das, you're not missing Machasat. What are you missing? Which goes on Shlema Melech. We just Alei Mekomak. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, you are Chasat. There's missing. There is a Chasad. All the words of chasad and everything is coming up. Now, kol atera kol is connected. He's chasad, he's missing the sogas pasha paraduma. Maybe that's the gvul there. It sounds very much that's the gvul. In other words, that just like a chayil is a gvul. In other words, so on one hand, when it says the Eibishter says he gave him abundant wisdom and tfuna, but then he limits it by saying kechel asher al srasayam. Kechel is taka abundant, but also a boundary.
It's not
So maybe like that.
It's also connected to Har Sinai. The Eden had a boundary around Har Sinai. They couldn't go higher. What does that mean? Ad kan doesn't only mean physically. It means that
Okay, you're already going the Halshim b'matan Teira.
Choel asher al srasayam ke'ofel.
Yeah. Well, we spoke about Yam is going to be believable. Okay, it all fits.
Together.
Yeah. This medrash fits very well into everything being discussed. Just for the record, I just hope that the Rebbe Rashab sees it the way we see it.
All of the Tanoim, they go into this Inyanim, Amorim,
No, it says in Sefirah. It's not that the Urim V'Tumim writes. The Urim V'Tumim, and Halacha Sefer, he writes. He asked this question. So what did he say? When they wrote with Yerushalayim, all the Diyukim we say in Rashi and Rambam, Lav Dafka, they were conscious. It's a Feferish Gemara, by the way, Menachos.
That's the Ruach
Meisha heard Rabbi Akiva learning, and he said, "It's Kol Shadaite. Why did you give it to it? It's from me." So the Yibishter said, "Everything he's learning is from you." So it's the Klolim and the Pratim. It's the nature of Chol Teresh Shebal Peh. Kol Masha Talmid Vosik Osid Lechadish, and he said, "Nitl Meisha Misinai." The answer is klal and prat. Like, it's all in the klolim. Obviously, Moshe knew that for example, a Shabbos elevator, shilas like that, or biological, or today, genetic engineering, or questions about medicine. It's all halachic questions that are being using halachic principles. So, is it on one hand it's a gilei hell, on the other hand it's a chiddush? That you have to say. The Rebbe brings it very much about the Tanoim Amaroim. It brings about Shammai and Hill. It says Teirele b'Shamayim. He next to this says that Shammai paskins al pi Gvura and Hill al pi Chesed, pi Sherish and Neshama. Teirele b'Shamayim. They can't paskin. Right. So the Rebbe answers because the same shayla about Ayin Medavar b'Shamayim. Why don't you see so often there's no Medavar b'Shamayim? Because once they internalized it, it may have been their predisposition Chesed and Gvura, but they struggled with it. They struggle with it. Remember, listen, a goof without a neshama can't learn Torah. So everything's coming from the neshama. But the neshama is what you harav in Torah with your seichel. So then the chesed is gelegt by Hillel. It wasn't just he looked in Shamayim and said, "My soul comes from chesed." That's why I'm paskening. He brought rayas. He struggled with it. It's a yisod ikri in the whole thing. In Shal Shachuvish Shamayim, there's a sefer. So Margolis has there all the comments. It brings all the shilas about this. How could there be Shal Shachuvish Shamayim b'chlal? So it's a b'chalocha. Teirele b'Shamayim. Whole thing with Rabbi Bar Nachmani even. So there's the whole Kesef Mishnah there.
He died already.
Right, because if he died, he can't be paskin. And they wanted dafka and a shama beguf. Mesifta the Rekiya, Mesifta the Kutsha B'richu. So it says that he paskin right before Parcha Nishmas or whatever. I mean, this is. It's a combination. It goes back to the same combination. It's a combination of Elokus Slapshas B'Seichel. It's the whole point of learning Torah. That's why the Eibishter didn't want Moshe just Halach L'Meish M'Sinai and Torah Shebiksav. I'm giving you the klolim, and now you guys fight it out.
Work it out.
And then what's this? And then the consensus. Apirov. What's the lashon of mishpatim? The psak is api. Achred Abel Hattis. Okay, so these are the shilas. Vimkei malchas sarta. So what means malchas sarta? Yeah, beferish yechasarta. What do you mean? What are you saying? What he's been missing? Well, the havin kozet so lahagdamashn is barleil. To understand all this, we need to preface what we learned earlier. That Damshach is the transmission of the Ovis, that they draw down the divine elokus, divine revelation in the world. They drew down from the root and source of Ishtalshlus, Yataka the highest root, but still the root. As he said, from Shir Atzme Bekeach all the way, they went all the way into the engine room where God envisioned this structure. They drew down more because the Pisei der Ishtalshlus is creation. There's a flow into the machine enough that it needs to sustain it. Yeah.
not cover.
According to the Maimer Kavamida, the flow is regulated, and it flows and it diminishes to the point that in Malchus there's no Gilead, as we discussed. The Ovis who went all the way back to the root and the source. Drew down the revelation into Malchus, and through that they drew down the Mata below.
Like he explained about Yaakov, Mamshech from like
Exactly right. Malchus took a Matseva, which is Malchus. He took the Evan, which was Malchus, and elevated it and drew down. He spoke also of Yitzchak of Shem and the whole Matla Mata. Kuf Memhei 145. Lahoven Zeh b'teis biur. Just in case you didn't understand it well enough to understand this with additional explanation. Yesh lahagdim. So here starts another subplot within the subplot, within a subplot, within a subplot, within a subplot. I'm not sure how many subplots there are. I know there are many. So yesh lahagdim, we have to preface Eich shehamshach sa'ir b'seider shtalshus das Sefirah yeshefresh, how in the transmission of the energy in the cosmic order of the 10 spheres, yeshefresh is a difference be'eifan hamshach shel tzedek atzilus, in the way the transmission takes place for the need for atzilus, purpose of atzilus, u'letzedek biyah, and for the need of biyah. V'hainu the b'hamshach, which means v'hainu the b'hamshach b'es Sefirah gufa, that in the transmission of the 10 spheres itself, mechub l'zah, from Chochmah Bina to the Midas, Zohar Ampin, u'mizah l'malchus, and from the Midas to Malchus, that's the whole 10 spheres. Yesh hefresh, there's a difference. Im hamshacha hi l'tzedek atzilus atzmei. If this hamshacha through the spheres is for only for the need of atzilus itself, oish hamshacha l'tzedek biyah, or for the transmission is for the need of biyah. So this is now a new element of the interface. Now I refer you back.
Didn't we have that question if it was two things or one thing? The hamshacha between.
That's not what I was referring to. I know what you're saying. I know what you mean. They're similar with Zohar. There I think it was clear that it was between being in Zohar and then Malchus. But I'm referring to something else. Two things. In the last Maimer we learned that, remember the three examples. He gave an example of thought and speech. He gave an example of looking at the sun. He gave an example of the blind person, too much abundant light, so he cannot see. There's lack of veils. The veils are diminished. So he said there, I'm just referring because it reminds me, he said the chashava dibur, the concealment is to someone else, but in Hatzilas Atzmei it's revealed. The story with the blind person is an example. In the person himself, there's so much light. Just reminds me of, he said, Atzilus Atzmei and Atzilus compared to Biyah. So the key thing to remember now with this whole discussion is Atzilus is essentially the divine as it is in its own divine structure. It's not beyond structure. Atzilus is absolutely structure, 10 spheres. And not only structure, it's an immanent structure. It's Pnimi, it's not Makif. It has Hamshach is from Makif, but it's a fundamental structure. It's Adam Elyon. Adam Elyon is exactly like us. I mean, exactly like us. I mean to say we're B'Tselem Elikim. We're the counterpart of Adam Elyon of Atzilus. Atzilus is its purest form. Once you speak Biyah, you're already speaking now, transmitting to something outside of yourself. Remember, Dover HaNivdal. He used the words Dover HaNivdal. Like Biyah in Atzilus. What was Biyah in Atzilus, if you remember? Chochmah was Atzilus, Shabbat Atzilus. Bria, Shabbat Atzilus was Bina. Midas was Nihi, was bringing it outward. In the general terms, Atzilus and Biyah is just that it's two different relationships. It's the divine structure as it's in its own, and the way it transmits outside of itself. So when the flow of divine energy comes into existence, it's not just one flow that comes in to the structure of the Seder Shtalshus and that's it. It's so, as we said, it's so precise that there's a fundamental difference of how the flow enters in what's needed in Atzilus and what's needed in Biyah. And that's what he's going to discuss now. There's very different of how that flow, how the flow initially. Think of it this way. If the artist is envisioning a piece of art, and now he's created a piece of art, you can say there's what he would discuss between him and himself, or him and his experts about this art, and how would he explain it to a novice, to someone who doesn't know what art is. So you're already talking the same piece of art, but you're talking a different type of language. So he's speaking to experts that are on his level, the flow is an atzilus, so to speak. But there's also another way of how it's communicating to some people who are not yet appreciative, or not yet on the level of understanding the art for its own sake. Just giving you an example.
Such an example, because you're talking about Dibur, and Atzilus is a Machshava, Yud, it's Mekan Bekasai is a Chachma, and then...
Okay, so
it's like the way he's speaking it to himself.
Okay. Either way is fine. No, but it's either fine, because Atzilus is also Midas. There's also... that's just a question of fine, but it's the same idea. Another thing I want to say before we begin learning this, there's a whole section. I'm trying to remember where it is. That's before, where he talks about also the Tzedek Atzilus and the Tzedek Biyah. Let me point it out, just for myself at least. It's before the whole Makifim. It's right when he went over from Pnimi to Makif. It must be back in around Sheftim, maybe even earlier. Yeah. Here we are. Yeah. In the chapter 46 and 47. Yeah. Yeah, there he spoke very much about Atzilus as it is in itself, and Atzilus how it communicates with the world. I'll just point it out. I'll get back to it once we learn it. We'll compare chapter Mem Vov, Mem Zayin, Ches. Those three chapters are very similar to this idea. V'idiyas atzma yedeya se'elim. Huh?
He's talking about the Amshach, not about the Gilu Yin Atzilus and India.
Right.
The Amshach is really different.
Yeah. But that causes there should be a difference of how they. Yeah. So it goes like this. At times, the transmission is called. So the transmission from that level to level is called with the word letters. The Ace is Hengili Kumei Asa Bacon. The word Ace comes from the word Asa. It brings, it draws, it transmits. That's what As means. What's As? Simply put, if you don't have letters, you can have an idea and you have no way to transmit it. You have no way to communicate. So think of Aces as channels. They're channels. Asa Bacon. The bacon has arrived. It's a transporter, basically. Aces are a transporter.
Channel transports.
V'asa Mervavas Kedesh. Also the word asa. So they came, they arrived.
It's interesting that's connected to ACS also.
Yeah. But that's the same set. Us.
They're vehicles. That's
Us.
it.
Why is he bringing these eyes? Asa boiker, I understand, because that's boiker, it's like light. Asa Mervavas Kedesh, the einzige Mal steht is Asa Mervavas Kedesh. Other places doesn't say Asa.
It said ACS should be earlier in Huagil.
Okay.
What does that mean?
But Mervavas Kedesh means the multitudes, the tens of thousands, the holy angels, basically. That they made an appearance, they arrived. Yeah.
No, it actually says, but also made it of his Kaddish, that he came with him, with him appeared all these
Angels, okay.
That's from by Matan Torah.
Okay. And what does that mean? specifically spelling it out, that the Asis of the Elyon, the letters of a higher level, is the Gilui ala Tachton, is what reveals to another. In other words, the Asis, let's say in me right now that I'm communicating, is the Asis that were communicated to someone else. I don't want to say Tachton here. But basically in this case, when you go Darga L'Darga, you're talking about the letters are the carriers, as I said, the transporters from the source to the next level, to the lower level.
That's why he brings Boiker and Ruiz Kodesh, because Boiker is physical. It's light.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the Pamim, that's one way. Well, the Pamim Nikra Hamshach B'Shem Cyrus. And at times, the Hamshach is called the name hair. Cyrus means hair strands. Okay. Cyrus. Ukadis Beis Chaim, like it says in Eitz Chaim, the Cyrus, the Zoh, Nasa Meichel L'Nukva. That the hairs of Zoh, of Midas, become the Meichin, the intelligence, to Nukva, to Malchus. So here we have transmissions. Now, it's interesting, we just spoke about Cyrus. We spoke about Cyrus with Avram. Till Avram there was no zikr and no beard. He said because the Cyrus is the Hamshach in a narrow flow, but it's really a revelation of the divine.
They literally didn't have beards.
That's what it says, yeah. Some say white beards, some say no beards.
But Cyrus, did they have hair on their head though?
Why not? It says zikna, no beards. Not yeah. And he brought down that energy. We just learned it also by Kedach. Kedach wanted to diminish the energy. So Cyrus is on our minds here a bit. And then there's Asius. Interestingly, just for comparative purposes, if you recall back when he spoke in the level of Evan Sapir, Sefirah, he said that there's Keiches and Levushim. There's faculties that are like the body, the skeleton of the body, or the faculties of the soul. And then there's the Levushim, the garments that you put on your clothing. So in other words, these are all about levels of how something transmits. So now he's bringing Asis and Levushim. Generally speaking, there are 4 levels. What are the 4 levels? It goes like this. It goes, we spoke about it earlier. What was it? Gufin, Levushin,
the brain,
Pasayas, Tikunim and Pasayas. I don't remember already. Okay.
What does it mean? Cyrus the Zoh Nasi Moichin Nuklu Malchus?
Just think of it like this: a diminished flow from a higher level goes into the next level. So sometimes you use Asius, sometimes you use Cyrus. Cyrus is obviously more diminished than Asius.
More diminished.
Yeah, more diminished. Yeah, Cyrus is very rare, very much a very limited amount of like the cider. You pull it, you feel, but you cut it, you don't. So there's a very minimal amount of energy in it.
That's
but it's an example.
That when you cut his hair, he was screaming.
Shimshon HaGiver was drunk, so he couldn't scream.
But Shimshon HaGiver is known to be a Murdik.
He was drunk?
They say this story.
What about
He
the
was
other
sleeping. He was sleeping.
Yeah, Jacobson we're talking. Yeah.
But Shimshon HaGiver was a very smart man.
So he couldn't drink one.
He was a very strong man.
He's strong. So what does it have to do when they cut his hair?
Yeah.
What?
That's the Rambam.
He's a shefet. Yeah. He was a smart man.
I mean, he could have been very.
I don't know what cartoons you saw, but Shimshon, you saw some cartoons.
So he was a big Talmud Chacham, basically?
What was he drinking? Rambam is saying that's why he's following.
But that's not what he's known for.
What did he drink?
He's being a giver.
He's on Samson and Delilah for tearing open lions.
We call him Shimshon HaShofet. We call him Shimshon HaGiver.
No, not at all.
They don't call him Simpson the Drunk.
No, that's only in the cartoons.
When you're not
That's only Tzivus Hashem cartoons.
What did he drink?
Because of even 20 years after he died.
Corn liquor?
It was a Mashiach's soul.
Couldn't drink wine.
Maybe people know it in a different thing.
Okay, the Pamlik, I'm sure B'Shem says this.
There are a lot of information that we need to understand.
The Ayin and the Ayin of this is the Nekudah shebechol Sefirah yesh Nekudah Sefirah Partzuf. The Ayin of this is, now it's known, because it's known, in every Sefirah there's 3 levels, which we've also discussed. Nekudah, a point. Sefirah is a full entity, and Partzuf is a structure. So Nekudah, think of it as a brick, Sefirah, think of it as a room, and Partzuf, think of it as a structure, a whole building. So a brick is the point. Just an example. A Sefirah is like Chachma Bina, and Partzuf is a combination of like a full. Partzuf is like when you say a face, and Nekudah is one point. A Sefirah is the eyes, the nose, the ears. A Partzuf is the whole face, the whole structure, whole configuration. It develops from Nekudah, Sefirah, Partzuf. We learn Nekudah, Kav, Shetach. Similar, not completely, but Nekudah, point. Kav is a line, Shetach is a plane. So a line is only length. A Shetach has length and width. And Nekudah is just a point. So in development, everything works through these three. Nekudah hi atzmis ha-nekudah klolish shel ha-sfiras. What's Nekudah? Nekudah is the core point, central point of the Sfiras. What is it in Sfiras itself?
Talking now about even one Sefirah.
Yeah.
Right.
Shel ha-sfira. Yeah. V'hu b'chinas keser shaba. In the Sfiras is the keser within every Sfira.
So that's Nekudah.
Shekelelas kol ha-tesfiras, that encompasses all the 10 spheres, the other ones, that will extend the spread from it. Think of it like a seed. The seed of every sphere, the point, is Keser. Then Keser will develop and will expand, and then will Chachma and Bina and so on.
Like the Malchus too.
We don't count Das in this case. Kol ha-tesfiras, memena nimshachim emizgalim, or memena from it, meaning from the Nekudah of Keser, they extend and they reveal. Literally like a seed, like a point that has everything concentrated, but it's not yet in any expanded way. Let's talk about Chachma, like Chachma. The point, the Nekudah in Chachma is Keser Shebachachma. What does that mean in some logical terms, palatable terms? It means the desire to conceive. The desire to
gain wisdom,
to conceive of idea, to cognite. I don't know if that's a cognite. The desire to use your mind, basically. So the Ratzon, don't dismiss it as some type of distant thing. Without that, you don't have a seed. So obviously it's in a spiritual sense, but psychologically speaking, the seed of it all begins the desire. That's the Keser Shebachachma. That I want to sit down and study something right now and use my mind. That's Keser. That's where it all begins.
First paragraph is like that.
That encompasses, even though it's desire still, it's only a point, it encompasses the Ischakmus, the Ischakim.
the growing in intelligence.
Chakim is say by pari. The chakim means to think things through.
To trick. Here means for
Yeah. Here's to sit. Yeah. Look, we all can understand this. It's not like we're always in a state of mischakim. You have to have a particular effort. Looking for the right. Conceive is the technically correct word. Conceive doesn't mean necessarily, because l'schakim, this beinan, for example, is not l'schakim. L'schakim is to the beginning process, basically the process to intellectualize, to use your intellect. So, this is what Razal say, that a person should always learn with his heart desires. It's an excellent ayah. Because when his heart desires in something, Yaskov is chakim boy. He will then conceive and comprehend it, understand it. And he will come to understand and comprehend. I repeated myself. I know Yaskov is chakim, v'yavim v'yasik. We need a little precise definition. Yaskov is definitely to intellectualize. Chakim is to conceive. You have to say that. And Yavin is already havana v'asaga. Comprehension and understanding, more details like.
So
He will get it.
It's already been actually.
So he said because it starts with Kesser, which is your will,
Yeah.
what you want to learn, so that's why it should start like that.
Yeah, that's why when he came to ask him, what should he begin with? He says, whatever you want, what your heart desires. The Rebbe actually applies it not just to the place where you go to learn, the physical location, but also where do you begin in the safe. Actually, what's the pshat there? The pshat there is the location, yeah, and it's also where what shchelik and Torah you should learn.
That's a pshat also.
It's also pshat. They're both. I think there he wanted to know where to go. Okay, but it's the same idea. But mokim shli bechofetz. The bottom line is, when a person desires, it's a whole different story than he wants. If it's forced, not going to use chachma properly.
The brain is shut.
The thing is,
Kabbalah Sol
the thing is
doesn't help so much
for
with
children. You know what? In cleanup, what to make it something that the children are very.
Kabbalah Sol can make you desire it. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Whatever motivates. But what you have to want it.
You don't see that.
You can have Kabbalah Sol and stay in your bed. There's sleeping Kabbalah Selniks all over the place.
How do you motivate children like this in
that
school?
makes you to want it.
That's another reason. It could be that, or it could be your own. He doesn't say what the but bottom line, there has to be a will. Remember, we spoke about a disease called mania. He said, where there's no desire. Person has no will. He could have all the faculties working, and you don't want.
That's called anomy in sociology.
Yeah, remember we had it back early, very early.
Anomy.
It's not
Anomy. It's like normless.
Here he calls it mania. Mania.
Mania means anomy.
Okay, but it's basically you could have everything. Yeah.
In English.
And we learned then, I think, there's two ways to say that. You could say no desire, they physically don't have, you just don't have desire, you're just completely unmotivated. Or there's actual physical nerves that are not communicating to the faculties to do this or that. We could also say that Nekudah ha'atzmi si etzim Nekudah sa'chochma ma shebiyicholte lovi al kol davrar chochma. He's giving our second interpretation of the Nekudah, Sefirah Partzuf, the Nekudah within chochma. We could also say that Nekudah atzmi is the core point, which is the central point of chochma, is etzim Nekudah sa'chochma, not desire. Here's a separate interpretation now. It's actually Nekudah sa'chochma is the point of ma shebiyicholte lovi al kol davrar chochma. It's the potential Chochma, that the ability to come to any type of wisdom. So this is a bit lower than the Kesser Shebach. This is it another interpretation? Kesser Shebach Chochma? Maybe. I don't know about that.
It's explaining
but it's definitely. 1 second. So basically, it's Etzem Nekudas HaChochma should be Cholti Love Al Kol Dvar Chochma. We're not talking now the desire. We're talking about that Etzem Nekudas HaChochma. There's the point. There's like the seed. The reason. He's not saying that. No, he didn't say that, and I would not go there because it could be another interpretation of Kesser B'Chochma. I'm not sure, but anyway, it could.
This is low. I think this is.
No, but this is This is more. If you think about the Nekudah as a seed, the seed grows into a tree, the Sefirah and a Partzuf. So it's more fitting that the Nekudah be the actual Chochma in its concentrated form that has the ability to conceive of every possible idea, as opposed to the desire for it. I mean, that's what it looks like. But let's read it. We're not talking here about the Koyach HaMaskil. We're not talking about the power, but he has the ability to conceive and to think of every possible concept and idea, every possible intelligence. Because that's the Koyach HaMaskil. The Koyach HaMaskil is like this power to conceive of everything.
If he's a healthy person, basically.
When it's flowing well, when it's a smooth transmission, is able. There's no blocks, there's no impediments. He's able to conceive. So Koyach HaMaskil is think of it like the engine within the brain, within the mind, that is not seichel itself, but is the machine that allows all seichel to churn, to begin. It's Koyach HaMaskil, which is sometimes referred to Chochmas Tema. Here he's saying that's not what we're talking about. The It says also. Why? Because now we're talking in Nekudah in.
No. This is still a hamster to this. If you look at the next.
Oh, you're right. Okay, one second. No. No, looks like the Nekudah.
He is explaining here on Nekudah about this, what we spoke before.
Right.
So it's not the Keich HaMaskil.
What is it?
Yeah, but now he's talking about something which is higher. בעצם כוח החוכמה, קודם שמבין ומשיג עדיין.
לא, אני חושב להפך, זה יותר נמוך. נקודה בכוח החוכמה וזה שנידן כוח המאסטר.
Let's read it and we'll find out. Listen, trust me, it's going to get complicated no matter how you twist it. So let's read it. I'm not positive. Let's try to see where he's going. So bottom line is, he's saying that now another yesh lemer, nekudah atzmi is etzem nekudah sachachma shebicholta level called var chachma. Now he's saying the einzeh. This is not the keich hamaskil shebicholta. I don't know the difference between cholta lahaskel schakam bicholta level called var chachma. Okay, the chilech verstehen. The fall lerner. I don't know. I mean, let's go. Let's see.
Yeah. Because before he's talking about that is connected to the specific chachma. Here he's talking about even when it has nothing to do with it. It's the rishis of.
I don't know if that's correct. I think it's the opposite.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Let's read it. Let's read the whole thing. We could always go back. Thank God we have Esis Machkimis. Let's go. Nekudah hu bekeich keich chachma atzma. Nekudah is in keich chachma atzma, not the keich hamaskil that from where seichel comes. It's in chachma itself. For who? What is it? Masha bicholti lo ve'al kol dvar chachma. His ability to come to every type of intelligence, to understand it and comprehend it. Right now, if I were to interpret this without reading further,
a few lines.
1 second. Hold on.
You have to read it.
Yeah, another few words to the dot.
One second. Before I want to read the few dots, I want to say something. The Partzuf is saying the keich hamaskil is the engine that feeds all thoughts and ideas. It's an engine room, like. And here we're talking in Chokhmah, the ability. You could have Keich HaMaskil working, and if your Chokhmah does not have this Nekudah, you have an engine that's ready to flow, and everything is this, but Chokhmah has in it a point that it's able to appreciate things, it's able to comprehend things. It's not just a source of energy, it's the machine itself is working right. Rak, shu be'etzem Keich HaChokhmah kedem shemevin masig adayin. The only thing is, what's the difference between this and Chachma itself, the Sefirah of Chachma? Because we're talking the Nekudah. I know you read it like this. You read all this was part of Keich HaMaskil. That's not what he's saying. He's qualifying now. He's saying it's not Keich HaMaskil, but it's also not the Sefirah of Chachma. What is it? I'm trying to find a good. Let's read on and let me see if we can. Okay, the best example I would give for this is I'm thinking like this. You have a generator of electricity that's generating electricity. Generator is working very smoothly, no problem. Electricity is flowing into the pipes, into your wires, into the central, to your home. Now it enters into, let's say, an appliance, but the appliance is the fuse blew, or the appliance, something's wrong with the appliance. So there's no problem. The Keich HaMaskil is flowing, but the Chachma is not. So you have within the Chachma itself, you have a point that simply that this faculty called conceiving of an idea is able to work, able to function. For example, our Keich HaMaskil is at work even when we're asleep, but our Keich HaChachma is not. Keich HaMaskil is there. Keich HaMaskil is not a seichel. It's a machine that creates seichel. It's like a reservoir of water that comes into the home. But if the faucet is not on or the faucet is malfunctioned, so what do you have? That's the example I would give. So that's the Nekudah. The Nekudah is that the Chachma itself, the core place of Chachma, has the ability to conceive. I mean, there are scenarios where you could have, listen, a lot of people, for example, everybody has a Keich HaMaskil. Everyone was born, their soul has ability for Seichel. Some people don't access it. Some people have difficulty accessing. Whatever the reason is, whatever is blocking. That's why he said Hamshacha B'Tev. He was saying that could be flowing, but if you don't have the Nekudah of Chachma, you don't have the next step.
So
This is definitely what the pshat.
So this is the first thing that you said, or the second thing?
This is the second thing. The first thing was Keser Shebachachma, the desire to conceive, the desire to use your intelligence. That was the Nekudah. Then he says, now Yesh Leimer, in Chachma itself there's a Nekudah, and that's not Koyach HaMaskal, and it's not the Sefirah of Chachma. It's that first point, the ability for Chachma to comprehend everything.
Of a specific idea?
Huh? Koyach HaMaskal? No. Because you could have the other way. You could have. He says, Yesh Leimer Gam.
No,
Yesh Leimer Gam Ken.
The Gamke, the Nekudah, the Zelbe Nekudah can be described.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It's not. You can interpret it two ways. You could say this second interpretation is also Keser Shebachachma, or you could say it's a Nekudah within Chachma. It's not Keser. Who says you have to call it Keser? There's no mitzvah to call it Keser. No. You could say either way. You could say Yesh Leimer Gam Ken is unclear. To me, you can interpret it both ways. Nekudah Sefirah Partzuf.
Nekudah is being described in two ways, either like as a Keser of the Sefirah,
The Rotzen, or you could say the second way is another way of saying Keser.
Same thing. The description.
But I just told you there's two ways to interpret the Yesh Leimer Gam Ken. You could say it's another way of explaining the Keser Shebachachma, or you could say it has nothing to do with Keser Shebachachma. It's the Nekudah within Chachma. Koyach HaMaskal kriegt nicht da rein. He says it's not Koyach HaMaskal. Yeah, exactly, a level before the Nekudah. That's clear. That's no matter how you twist it. One second. I just made it clear like this. Is this another interpretation, Keser Shebachachma? It's not clear here. There's nothing conclusive here. At this point. Maybe he'll say something. I'm saying right now, I could see it being a Yesh Leimer that also...
According to your explanation.
I think it's lower actually, but that's a separate story. Because desire is outside of Chachma. Desire is in Keser. It's not even Chachma. In Chachma now he's talking the Nekudah. So what do you mean lower, higher? I don't know what you mean by lower, maybe.
That is
if you're standing on your head, maybe it's higher.
This is the source.
Huh?
This is the source.
No, the sword Rotzen comes first. Without a Rotzen, you don't have this even. I think it goes like this: Rotzen, Koyach HaMaskal, this Nekudah, and then Chachma. That's how I would it's Pashut.
I'm in total agreement.
How could you start with you have the Nekudah Chachma before Rotzen? Doesn't make any sense. You have to desire first. Then when you desire, you have a Koyach HaMaskal that is working, thank God, and you have the Chachma. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very. It's not that complicated. It's not mathematical. Think practically. You have to think practical. The desire to Chachma doesn't come before Chachma. It says the opposite. Let me just look at the Yesh Leimer Gam Ken. I want to just see one thing. I would lean that it's a second interpretation in Keser Shebachachma. You know why? Because he says Yesh Nekudah Nekudah he atzmis Nekudah close to Sefirah v'b'chinas Keser Sheba. So he makes a general rule that the Nekudah is the Keser within the Sefirah, and then comes the two explanations. I would lean a little more that's a second interpretation of Keser, because he makes that rule that Nekudah is the Keser Shebachachma. The problem then is, however, the reason I avoided saying that was there's problems then. Not from here, from other places in Chassidus. Because Koyach HaMaskal is usually Chachmas Tema, which is Chachma of Arich. The Nekudah of Chachma is already Chachma. Where does it fit in Keser? There's no place for it in Keser.
No, does the Keser Shebachachma?
Maybe it's the Yisod. No, the Rotzen. No, but the Keser Shebachachma is the Koyach HaMaskal. The Keser Shebachachma is the Rotzen, the Arich. Hold on, the Rotzen in Chachma.
This
is the Yud. 1 second, the Yud.
It's not only the Rotzen. Give a quick shit up. Koyel is Chakmus.
One second.
It's Koyel is Chakmus also.
Hold on.
It's like a seed.
Okay, it's not a problem because in Keser you could say there's Yisod Abba. There's plenty places to go. There's plenty of room. Yeah, there's plenty of room to do it, to explain it any way you want.
If you don't mind to just repeat, I don't see in his description the difference between Koyach HaMaskal and the Nekudah Chachma.
I just gave you an example from electricity. Okay, so I'm not going to repeat that because that's. I just gave you an example from electricity. What's
the reservoir?
What? I just gave you an example.
No.
Tell me what's wrong with my example.
No, so you know what? Nothing is wrong with your example. Just I don't see it in the words that you're saying.
Okay, so read the words again.
I'm reading.
One is the ability to do so. One is the power that gives that where everything generates from. Don't be technically a cholte. The point is, but it's not koyach hamaskil. He says this is not koyach hamaskil. This is in chochma atzma. Why don't you focus on those words? This is in chochma atzma. This is outside of chochma atzma.
Koyach hamaskil is outside.
Yeah, he says it clearly. What, I just told you what the example I gave. Tell me do you understand the example?
I hear you.
Take the example now, fit it to the words. It fits to the words very well. I'll read it. I'll read it again. Here. So he says like this: Nekudah atzmis, nekudah zakol gam yishlem gam ken. Nekudah atzmis etzem nekudah sachachma shebicholti lov al kol dvar chachma. In chachma itself, it has to be functioning chachma. The functionality of chachma. You need a healthy seed. For you to be able to think of ideas, you need a healthy seed. Basically, what plants the seed is koyach hamaskil. Ve'ein zeh ma shebicholti lahaskil. She says, this bicholte love al kol dvar chachma. There bicholte lahaskil b'chlal. Koyach hamaskil is the general ability that you have the ability to use your intelligence. L'schaka b'chol dvar seichel v'chachma shuzeh b'koyach hamaskil shehu b'hamshachet teva bicholte lahaskil. You have an engine that's able to generate an intelligent process. Now we're talking chachma atzma. That you have to have chachma word. Who should be a cholte love? Again, there it's be a cholte haskil, and here it's be a cholte love al kol dvar chachma.
Also, we're talking about the koyach.
Lahaskil would be to generate seichel. Love meaning the ability to actually use your seichel to with a point. Just begin with an idea, bring it to bina, move along. Essentially, chachma is a faculty that needs to work. Koyach hamaskil does not make chachma work. Koyach hamaskil gives chachma ability to conceive of things. Like I said, it's the engine. It's the source, the reservoir. And chachma has to work. So you can have a koyach hamaskil. For example, children. Young children are born with a koyach hamaskil, but it's not yet a developed chachma that they can do much with. You need a chachma has to, like in Midas you could understand it also well. You could have a koyach, let's say, hamischassid, the power to love, but you haven't developed love. You haven't actualized it in any way. You're not acting on it.
He's saying it.
Huh?
He's saying it.
Let's see. Now he's going to continue explaining. I just wanted to say this.
Okay.
That's what. If it's kesser shebachachma, yeah, because you say da, but don't we have nihi? We have a lot of levels in kesser to apply to this if necessary. But I would definitely say so. Desire is ratzon is kesser shebachachma, koyach hamaskil, the nekudah within chachma itself. Okay.
It wouldn't be just the kesser in chachma itself, just the kesser in chachma atzma, just the desire in chachma atzma.
I don't know what you're talking about. He just said a second interpretation. He's not talking about ratzon now. He's not talking about desire.
The kesser shebachachma.
That's a desire within chachma.
We're saying that precedes koyach hamaskil. Why don't we just say it's in chachma atzma?
I don't know what you mean. Why? Of course it precedes. Desire to think precedes the thinking.
Isn't there parts of shalom in chachma itself, including kesser? And therefore the desire to learn was being kesser, and koyach hamaskil would precede that in a higher darker. The desire to learn would be in chachma itself.
I don't know. I would do it. I would not interpret it.
Because that'd be too. What's bothering me? It's too much subconscious.
Look, technically speaking, the koyach hamaskil is you're born with it, and obviously desire is something that comes up later in life. So technically you're correct, but I think in the levels it works the other way around. Desire always comes. It's the highest level desire, and then comes. And God desires first, and then come the steps. In our case, obviously, desire is either you desire or you don't desire. The koyach hamaskil is there, even if you don't desire.
Even in the vote of understanding, when you
right, fine.
Look at something and you have the desire.
So technically, correct. Technically, you begin. Yeah, but I think in the levels, probably desire is a higher level, even though technically, obviously, you have to first desire before. Koyach hamaskil resides within us, no matter what. Correct, even when you don't desire. But the power of desire is higher than the power of koyach hamaskil. Let's put it this way.
It's greater. It makes it work. As it shows.
Okay, so now it goes like this. like it's explained elsewhere, she'in yediyah atzmis. In the concept of a yediyah atzmis, she'yediyah etzem keichach moshe she'yova le'in k'she'yova le'fanav. Explained elsewhere in the Inyan of yediyah atzmis. What is that? She'yediyah etzem keichach moshe she'yova le'in k'she'yova le'fanav. Yediyah atzmis means that while let's read to the end of the thing, that you come to understand it. That's when someone brings before you the question. Before it was presented to that person, it was one state. Okay, I think Yediyah Atzmis, what he means here is at the Hakara, like a recognition.
He is the way that he's thinking.
It's really another one.
So when it's not before him, he doesn't recognize it. There's no recognition. When it's before him, he recognizes it. Let's read on. He doesn't need to conceive of something for this recognition. To come up with, to conceive of some type of new idea for this purpose. So simply to recognize and understand the thing itself. This is the idea, the knowledge, and the core intelligence should be that is, he has the ability to come to any type of understanding. Nekudah should be okay. The language here is a little tough.
It's not there, that's it.
We learned something similar. If you remember, we said about etzem chochem be'etzem kei chachmaseh. Brought from the Giga. Chochem be'mevin, what was the lesson there? The chochem be'mevin medaite. When you learn Ma'aseh Merkava, it says you learn with a chochem be'mevin medaite. She explained that there's a person who just gets things a different way. He has a different type of comprehension. He spoke about that at length. No, not Riyah. He didn't say Riyah. And he sees things, he has that ability. This is what reminds me of this, but I don't know if you speak about that same level. Let's read this again. Let me see if he uses the same language there. That was in the Sipur Machshavas Nalamis. That was Hamshach Nalamis. That was in Sapir. No, Sipur rather. Okay, where's that? Let me just see it a second. Just want to see if it will help us understand this. Yeah. Oh, wow. Every time I look back, I get... No, I know where it is. It's right here. No, chapter Tzadik Zayin. Let me just see something. He spoke about the espashus of Chochmah and the etzem of Chochmah. It's very awfully similar. Etzem kei, see etzem kei chachmos. Yeah, the top of it. Yeah. Right. Look at line 2 in chapter Tzadik Zayin, page 187. Yeah. It's a very similar type of idea. I think he can't be mashpia to others because he either has it or not.
And he also knows in himself that any question that we brought to him, he will be able to answer.
I don't know if it's exactly that. That's the only thing I'm wondering. Okay, but it's a reference point at least. What chapter did I say? Is that exact? Yeah, 97. Okay, let's go back here.
Write it next to it.
Huh?
Write it next to it.
I'm not sure if it's the same. I don't write it before I come clear. Just very similar lines there. There is, as he explains it more. Here, it's the language is very hard language here. I'm going to read it again. He doesn't call it the same thing. That's the thing that's distinction. He doesn't use Yediyah Atzmis earlier. There he uses Chacham Betzim Chachmasa. He uses Chamshach and Elamas, Machshava and Elamas. So it's a bit different. Yediyah Atzmis.
Can I use again the word Yediyah?
Yediyah Atzmis. Sheyedeya Etzem Kei Chachmasa. Well, even the word Sheyedeya Etzem Kei Chachmasa, what does that mean? That he knows his Etzem Kei Chachma? He's aware of himself. What does it mean here?
He's aware that...
Is this like the muscle of the giver? He knows that he has...
No, I don't think so. No. Anyway, I'm not sure what that means. Sheyedeya Etzem Kei Chachmasa. I understand that he has Etzem Kei Chachmasa. Sheyedeya. Sheyovei alein k'sheyovei l'fon of that. Sheyedeya Etzem Kei Chachmasa sheyovei alein k'sheyovei l'fon of.
We're able to grasp it as soon as it's brought before him. He doesn't have to generate a new idea, a new concept.
He's trying to explain the Nekudah Chachma, like I said, the appliance that's working properly. What does it mean that Chachma works properly? It doesn't mean that you conceive of ideas and come up with all kinds of innovations. It means you have fundamentally a machine, an apparatus called Chachma that works well. That's what he's saying here. It works well that it's just simply a powerful mind called Chachma, that whatever comes your way, you'll be able to appreciate. Recognition I used before. Yeah. That's what he's saying here.
He's saying before in Perek Tzadik Zayin. He is explaining it in line.
It's a little different language. It's just a little. He's trying to make a different point. But okay, so let's go. Do you need
to have a will to do that first, or is that?
You're already jumping to the will. I'm trying to understand what he's saying here. Yeah, but we're not. But now we're not there. We're in a different place. It's explaining a different explanation here. It's actually Yesh Leim Gamkin. It's something like this. He recognizes in himself. He knows he has confidence. Basically, that's what he probably means. And it's etzem kei chachma, that when something will come to him, he'll be able to address it. Technically, and now the thing hasn't yet been presented to him. He knows. In other words, it's not something that he's going to come up with. He's what's the word? He's quick on his feet. He's going to come up with a quick fix answer because he's a creative. He has fundamental wisdom. Right now, it's not because remember he's speaking. It's not the Sefirah of Chachma. It's not Koyach HaMaskil. So he wants to have a Nekudah of Chachma that is there in place. In other words, you know that your faucet is working. That doesn't mean you have to use it right now. When the moment will come, when the question will be presented, you have in lafan of yodei say. That's why I have to read it very slowly. You see, it's like a very meticulous.
So
it's clearly what he's saying. No, the opposite. The opposite.
He doesn't have to create anything. He doesn't have to generate anything.
Right. Kechmas is more than just the ocean. It's much like the source of where oceans come from. It's like the Mayan. Here we're talking about the.
Aber de Bitachon von vielen, als zu schaffen, das kommt von dem, was das schon genutzt, das ist...
I don't know.
Where it's coming from?
The Bitachon is not really the key word here. The key word is that there's an apparatus that's a functional one. The Nekudah is there. The thing is in place. It's something like this. It's like knowing you have a healthy eye, even if you're not using it. It's a healthy eye. The eye is in place. The time will come when you use it. It's going to be. It's a solid working eye. The Nekudah is in place, basically.
It's a good chip in the computer.
That's what he wants to point out. We're not yet in Chachma. Chachma, the Sefirah is already being maskil. It's already functioning. He doesn't have to be maskil davar b'shvil zeh. For this purpose, This type of awareness or self-confidence, you could say, the awareness of this etzem keichach moshe, doesn't have to come up with an idea. To come up with some, conceive of some innovation for this purpose.
Conceiving an innovation is before the chachma, right? That's keichach maske.
In other words, in case he needs...
It could be either way. It can go either way. Okay, interesting. You could say that way, or you could say it's chachma, that the Sefirah. Either way, it can go either way. I think it's probably more the chachma, the Sefirah. I'm not sure, but anyway, bottom line is kim leid the lovi al davarahu. So it's not about an actual seichel, it's about the ability to know this thing. V'hainu hayediyah be'etzem keichach moshe lover al kol dvar chachma. In other words, the hakara, like the recognition, the knowing, in his etzem keichach moshe, that he's able to come to any type of chachma, that whatever will come his way, he's confident. So in other words, even before he opens up a sefer, this chacham has his nekudah in place. Whatever's going to come, he'll figure it out.
This is why
He just doesn't use the word confident. He uses yediyah. In explaining yediyah, I see yediyah means recognition. It's almost like resonance, actually.
This is why I suggested the mashal gibur.
That's why I use the word.
V'zeu hanekudah ha'atzmi is the chochma masher bicholte love. You see, I am sure he's using here the Mittler Rebbe's language. That's why he keeps that bicholte love, as opposed to haskala maskil keich maskil. Let's use the language shebicholte lahaskil.
Much more hella. Further.
It's like and here's bicholte love. That's the word. Yeah, right. So in other words, yeah. In other words, a keich maskil. Let's say an afkamin in halacha. Keich HaMaskil, a little child can have also, but he doesn't have the Nekudas Keich HaChmos. He doesn't have the recognition that he can understand everything. He has a Keich HaMaskil, it's in there somewhere. Keich HaChachma is actually a Keich that is an actual faculty. I think when you talk more the physical faculties, it's easier to understand. It's like healthy eyesight. So whatever comes your way, you're going to see well. Doesn't mean you have to see it right now. That's the Nekudah.
You have to prepare yourself for it. You know that.
Right.
As soon as you look at it, you'll see it.
He's going to give now the same example in Chesed.
It's probably going to be easier to understand the chesed one, no?
Usually.
No,
Usually, but with the Rebbe Rashab, you never know. He's always full of surprises. The same thing is with love, with chesed, with kindness and love, loving kindness. And the Nekudah Klolish had Rotzen Lis Chesed. Back to Rotzen. The Rotzen Lis Chesed, that's the Kesed, the desire to do kindness. The Mishum Zeh Harihu Meseir Tomid Lahativ Heitiv Chazdei Umargish Kol Chesed V'Hatova. So the same thing like there. Yeah, there comes a second. 1 second. Let's start with the one. First is Kesed. Yeah. Meseir Tomid. So therefore, 1 second. There's the Ratzon, the desire to do kindness, and that's why awakens in him always the Heitiv Chazdei to do good with his kindness, to bestow goodness. And he senses and feels every kind and atov, every favor, every good deed.
Because he wants to.
Oy, just like before Gam Yishlev. Oy, shu etzem nekudas nediva shebelev. Or it's not the desire, is the core point of the diva shebelev, that you are a gracious person. Here I have a few good examples. To be a chol to this chesed b'chol minei chesed. It's not actually doing chesed, which is already the Sefirah. It's that you are capable to do chesed with any type of chesed. This is all Nekudah, not Sefirah yet.
But this is not kesel.
It's seemingly not now. It's seemingly clearly not kesed shebe chesed or kesed shebe chachma, even though it earlier appeared a bit. Yeah, it's fine. Either way, is really
maybe chachma is possible because kesed is closer to chachma.
Maybe. But you see, it depends how you define kesed. You could say kesed shebe chesed. That nekudah depends which level of kesed. The ratzon shebe kesed, it's not. That's for sure not. But it could be lower levels of kesed. I don't know. I mean, I don't have to force it. He doesn't say it. I want to just give one example for the chesed one, because this one is far, and I think it also applies to chokhmah. And now it's coming clear. It's emerging. I gave once a class And I spoke about the difference between a person who does good things and a person who's a good person. The one is a verb and one is a noun. One is a state of being. A good person is good 24/7, like the Frierdiker Rebbe says. A soldat, a soldier is 24/7. He's a soldier even when he's asleep. He's ready to be mobilized any given moment. A person who does good deeds is good while he's doing good. They're not when he's not doing good. Only when he's doing good. So it's an act of goodness, as opposed to a good person. What's the difference? A good person means no matter what situation comes up, even if it's inconvenient, you know this person is going to be kind. The other one, you know he's kind when he wants to be kind in those situations. That's all you know. You don't know what he's like. You know that he has good actions. So a guy came over to me after the class. I'll never forget this. He was like in his 50s, early 50s. He was crying like a child. He said to me, I can't explain to you what you did tonight. You've answered a dilemma I've had for 40 years of my life. I grew up in a home. He said my father was a real big philanthropist, a very giving person. He says, I remember Tuesday nights, the door was open in our house. Anyone came, everyone left with something, whether it's money, advice, a job, a reference. He was completely gracious. No one was turned away. My father helped many people. He said, but on the other hand, he had a part to him that was very not nice. He didn't treat us all so well, my mother. And if he came Wednesday night, when he was playing his poker game, he couldn't even get into the door. And he always had, as a child, you get confused. On one hand, my father's such a good man, there's no question. He says, I don't no doubt he was a great man in many ways. A lot of people don't do that. But on the other hand, I didn't see the consistency. He says, you answered my question. My father did good things. He wasn't necessarily a good man. Maybe that was his habit from his father. That was Tuesday nights, that's what you do. And I'm not taking away, he said, from anything he did. But it was not 24/7. It wasn't when it was not on his terms. It was on his terms. And again, he wasn't saying it to criticize his father. He just said to put things in context, a little clarity. And this is exactly what he's saying here. The Nekudah Etzem HaChesed is a good person, not a person who does good things. Obviously, a person who's an Isha Chesed Nekudah is going to then do good things. But you could do good things and not have the Nekudah so intact. And I think you could apply this back to Chachma, the same thing. Now that I read it, you have it. You have
the good man in this part. But it is
the nafkamina would be when it's inconvenient. The nafkamina.
The way that he is explaining here.
He's saying, so he says, he's not talking about actual doing acts of chesed. He's saying, he has that thing. I mean, what I'm saying now is not exact explanation of what he says here. I'm just giving an example where you can relate it a little more. Yeah, that's all. That's all. My example was not. I'm not saying this is what the Rebbe Rashab said. What I said to the guy, but it becomes very clear that there are 2 points in every faculty. You can have a faculty that's intact and solid, and whatever comes your way, you can handle. And then you have a faculty that is not necessarily the Nekudah is there, and in each situation you work it out. Either you work it out, or you don't work it out. Like there are people who've developed, even physically, exercise their muscles to a point you can't tell until they're challenged. And suddenly you realize, hey, this person is really good. It's called hustlers, because they've developed something. So it's like, it's basically trying to explain the Nekudah. Again and again, I want to say, all this is meant to help us, train us to think in edler ways. You see somebody, so you can think, okay, great person. You have to think more deeper into the Nekudah. What is the person made of? This is really just a real way of understanding deeper who we are. So we just look at the Sefirah. We don't just look at Partzufim, you look at the Nekudah. Nekudah is a whole different story. You see this constantly with the Rebbe in Yechidus and letters to people, how the Rebbe brought out the Nekudah in them. It wasn't just telling them he was showing them you have the ability to do it in whatever situation you're in. It's a whole different way of educating people. It's like a real mentor where you help a person come to realize you have in you to do it. Now you have to figure out how to. Now, obviously, like the Alter Rebbe said to that guy, he said it could be. He says, I said, why don't you learn? He says, that he said the Rebbe said to me, such a good man. He said, but I could be a lamdan anytime I want to be. He says, just like a ganef is not someone who could steal but does steal. A lamdan is not someone who could be a lamdan but is a lamdan. So this is the other end of it. And the Nekudah without Sefirah remains dormant, latent. So now he goes, next step. V'Sefirah his galus ha-tesfirah shebechol Sefirah. Sefirah now, no longer Nekudah, is the revelation of the 10 spheres in every Sefirah. U'kamay Nekudah ha'askola. Like the Nekudah Haskala, the point of intelligence, Chachma in other words. Oh, Nekudah Haskala, that's the word he used by Primis Chachma. Nekudah Haskala, remember the Nekudah where the resonance? Bekam became a mavur, the Nekudah Haskala b'chinis Yisoid Sheba Chachma. V'niska gam ken le'el Perek Mem Aleph. Perek Mem Aleph. Hey, I gotta see that. Oh yeah. That's the Perek, the famous Perek he was referring to earlier, with Zriya, Hisamtus, the whole thing. The main thing is the Nekudah, the leg, Hanochas Sichlis. Okay, like he said also. What is it? What does he call this? Yisoid Sheba Chachma. What did he say before? Nihi Sheba Chachma. We had Midah Sheba Chachma. Yisod is the Nekudah. V'yeshlem shezagam shehu Nekudah Haskol Sheba Ba'asoga Debina.
That's Nihi of the Chachma that comes in Bina.
I love this.
That talks about over here.
He's tying up those knots now too. Oh boy.
We just had that, didn't we?
I know, but he didn't say this. Now he's added. There he spoke about Nihi and Midas. He didn't mention Yisod.
Before he mentioned Yisod, Abba was the
By the water.
Sichli,
By the sea.
and the Chalim B'Chachma was the.
He didn't mention Yisod Abba.
Yeah, it was in the parenthetical.
Where did he mention it? You see it? You see Yisod Abba? Where? Which line?
He talks about the Etzim Nekudah Haskala, and he talks about.
Yeah, but where does he say Yisod? I don't think he mentions Yisod there. I remember vividly that he skipped Yisod. I remember Nihi and the Midas. I remember things. On top? Let me see. Nihi, but not Yisod.
That's Yisod.
Oh no, Nihi. Okay, Yisod. Okay.
That the Sichli was Yisod Abba, and that the Hanocha was.
Oh yeah. The parentheses on the left side. Yeah. Right here. Page Reish Samach Tes. It says, you're right. Chachma Sheba Chachma. Sichli Sheba Nekudah hu b'chinas Yisoid Abba. V'anocha b'chinas Haven.
But here it talks about how it goes into Bina.
Okay, let's see what he says here. Yeshlem zeh Nekudah Sheba Ba'asoga Debina. So that's Chacham Haven b'Chachma. That's Chacham b'Bina.
והכוונה
כאן על עצם נקודות האסכולה היינו המצאות הדבר לעצמי. But the kavana kan is on the actual conception of the idea, the innovation.
Before we were talking when there was nothing, he didn't have anything.
You skipped one line. Oh, okay. The gam b'chinas haven b'chochma de'eridim etzem hamtzoas hadover.
We're actually talking about proceeding.
That's what he's saying. So also haven b'chochma, why they the bina within chochma is a day hayerid be'etzem hamtzoas hadover. Is a lower level from the etzem hamtzoas hadover, which is what we're talking about here. My Maisha is borla kamon b'da v'Hashem ar machas ani habeis. I involve. Okay. Maybe we should stop here.
Yeah.
This is going to be a very slow, painstaking process.
One more line.
I'll finish the line. Because he's now going into Sefirah. So this is this gals. Come in the Nekudah Haskala. V'akoyach sheyesh ba Nekudah b'zeh. Shetovi the Hasoga shezeh b'chinas haven b'chochma.
No, when you finish line, you're finishing. It's all part of it.
Yeah.
No. One second. Vasfis is gals at Tesfis b'chozim. Come in the Nekudah Haskala. One second. Okay, bottom line is what he's going to say here, and we will stop here. What he's going to say is that we now need these galos of all the spheres and chokhmah. Now we discussed this earlier. What is this galos of all the spheres and chokhmah? We said the nekudah we understand. The nekudah is the ability, the capacity. What's a sefirah? When all the tesfiras are revealed, what are the tesfiras? Bina sheba chachma, that's haven b'chachma. Midah sheba chachma, and nihi sheba chachma. That's what he's saying here. In other words, the Sefirah within Chachma is not just the Nekudah, the point of what we spoke about, the Gseed, that Chachma is able to handle, is able to come to understanding things. The Koyach Shevish Nekudah is to come to understanding. There's the Haven b'Chachma, like you spoke earlier. Then a Chachma is able to, what did he teach Haven b'Chachma back there? What did we say? What page was that? Page Reish Samachtas, right?
Right in the middle of the page.
Yeah. The Anocha Sichlis. There he says the Anocha Sichlis. Haven b'Chachma is the Anocha Sichlis. In other words, also the midas and chachma, which we said were the applications. Remember, and that's the revelation of chachma. Another yeshleimer is shazeu ine samtus shebachachma. It's also the resonating truth in chachma. Midas shebechinas is samtus k'mei shasik rav, which we also learned. The midas shebechinas is samtus, and the midas, the inclination, right? Is that we learned before shasik rav that he knows even though he doesn't have a full explanation. Remember, he said shasik rav was midas shebachachma.
Right, was the inclination.
It was what shebachachma?
Midas shebachachma. Exactly. Kuf Lamed Hey said it very specifically.
Wow. That is where he said Shastik Rav.
I thought he said that was something. I thought it was also news.
1 second. And then he goes back Partzuf. We'll stop here before Partzuf. This needs a little... Yeah, but what he's saying here is really summing up what he said earlier, and all this is to explain the Nekudah Sefirah Partzuf, which is coming to explain the Tzedach of Atzilus, Tzedach of Biyah, man alive. Okay, so we did page... beginning chapter of 145, page 280 through the top of 282.